Hey, Mark.
How's it going?
How you doing?
Not bad. How about you?
Pretty good.
Yeah. Are you outside? Nice. Your room's up. You're trying to talk.
I can ping Steve and see if he's coming. Because is that who we're primarily waiting on? Yeah, okay. Oh, there he is.
Hey, sorry I'm late. Are we still waiting for anybody or should we kick things off? Ben.
Ben can't make it today, so we can get the show on the road.
Cool. Up the list. First thing on the list is review outstanding RFCs. I'm going to share my screen and we can look through them if that sounds good to everybody. It looks like there's just one and it's a draft. Around the community charter, I'm just going to share a link since we only have one. Put it in the working group doc. Oh, it's actually in the working group doc. There. I think Forrest opened this one? Is Forrest here today? I think he's out. Any updates to this or anybody want to talk about where we're at? I see got some approvals. Oh, looks like Ben approved, but it's still in draft mode. So we'll wait for Forrest to take it out of draft mode before we send it through. Anything else on the community RFC? Any questions about that? Cool. Next thing on the list is branch name changes.
I don't know if you guys have talked about this yet, but on the CMB project, we renamed all of our default branches from master to main in an effort to have use more inclusive race-neutral language. And it seems like it's something we should do on the Paketo project as well.
I think Ben has already started doing this for his repos on Paketo. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the ask is, let's just bite the bullet and get it over with for everything so we don't have to think about it again.
I think that would be a really large effort for everything for the Cloud Foundry build packs to convert across because of just kind of the sprawl we have. But maybe a good place to start would be the repos that are in the Paketo org that are very public. Maybe Dan, that's something you could talk with Forrest about kind of prioritizing.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Cool. Anything else on that change?
There's a script, I don't know if you guys have seen this, that Dave Sire wrote that like repoints PRs and stuff, which is pretty convenient to help with this migration. I don't have the link handy, but I can Slack it to you guys after this.
The Spring project decided to make this change unilaterally across all their repos too. And so there's a lot of tooling for it. All right, any questions on that? Let's move on to the next thing. ACR mirror. 21.
Getting good performance on Azure, which is important to a lot of people using the Paketo build packs, would be markedly improved by having a run image mirror on Azure. I think Ben opened an issue. I was checking on the status of that.
I heard that Azure uses separate domains for registries, and so it would not have any impact. There's a thread on the CNB Slack about that. I think Ben started this morning.
Yeah, I think we can, on the CMB side, improve our mirror selection logic to make this work better. But I think getting a mirror in place would be a good starting point.
I don't think cross-repo blob mounting works across those registries, so I don't know if there's actually a difference between having a mirror on Azure versus like in one domain on Azure versus having it on GCR. Maybe
How
a little
many
closer.
are they, like I'm sorry, I'm behind on this thread. Are they region-specific domains, or are they more granular than that?
They're like ECR user-specific domains.
Hmm.
From what I haven't tried it. It's just what people said in the thread. So we were talking about on the KPAC side, creating a smart stack that would relocate towards your user-specific, the run image toward your user-specific domain to do a rebase to get around it. But I don't know if there's a helpful thing we can do for Paketo.
I'll look into that.
Ben is commenting on the thread right now.
Tangentially related to that, and I think Emily brought up, we ran into a huge number of issues this morning because the builders now include a Docker Hub run image mirror. And the default, if you name your app when you do like a pack build, ends up being like a index.docker.io/library/ whatever you happen to call your name thing. The output of that from pack build is incredibly unclear that that is actually what's happening, and like that you're now switching to a different mirror that you maybe didn't expect. So like going along with the Azure stuff, if you're going to be doing something like that, that portion of the code base, maybe in KPAC and maybe also in Pack, probably needs a lot more work in order to be very clear about what's actually happening. We found the behavior, or this morning I found the behavior to be like incredibly surprising. And really difficult to debug what was even happening.
What was the behavior that was surprising? That it changed mirrors when you targeted your image to a different location?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been using the GCR builders. And in fact, I even handed it a builder that was a GCR builder. It was like, this builder is on GCR. But then for the run image, it was like, oh, I see that you've called your app like my app. And internally, I refer to my app as like this Docker Hub registry kind of fake name. So that means you probably want to grab the run image from Docker Hub, but that's not really what I wanted it to do. That behavior is kind of strange. So I don't know, if you're going to do something that's like even more complicated than that, like auto relocate images for folks, the thing I would say in this feedback is like, it should be very clear to the user that that is what's happening, and should state it like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Because like trying to, I basically just went to the code base and read the code base to figure out what was happening. And that's like not the best user experience.
Makes
Turn
sense.
on the debug logs. Like we could talk about moving that from debug up a log level, but I thought at least at one point in time it did tell you what mirror was selecting and from what configuration when you're running pack in verbose mode.
It does tell you which mirror it's selecting, but it doesn't tell you why it's selecting that.
The underlying thing is people don't realize that my app really means the official my app on Docker Hub with that assumed, sort of globally assumed prefix or whatever.
Yeah, and
wonder
then
if
it's
the
also
weird-
strange that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if the weird part of this is actually that it still does this behavior when it's in the daemon configuration mode, right? So I think if you were running with publish, you really would be going to Docker Hub, and it would make sense that it's using that run image. It wouldn't even be pulling it. It would just be generating an image on top of the layers that happen to be co-located conveniently for you. And we made the decision a while ago in the daemon mode, if you need to pull the run image, to do the same logic so that the differences between daemon and publish are minimal, and it's not confusing to people that running publish in some edge cases would get you a different image than running daemon. But I wonder if, because the mirrors don't really matter in the daemon case, if we should just be pulling down the default one in that case.
Probably, or at the very least, allow me to do something like set default run image and set it globally instead of the current only option is on every invocation of pack build to tell it which run image you want in order to override it. So it's really, it would have been very painful for us to have to do because this is baked into basically every one of our integration tests across the entire Paketo organization. So it'd been like very expensive for us to fix that specific problem.
You can set global run image mirrors in the Pack CLI. I don't think you can set a global, like a
Steven,
run
I'd
image.
love to sit with
Yeah.
you and figure out how that works. I tried for probably 2.5 hours this morning, could not get it to do what I wanted it to do.
Happy to sync up for sure. The I don't think there's logic we would change. Like I definitely agree it could be more transparent. I don't think we need to change logic to make ACR work, because I don't think it's possible for ACR to work because you can't cross repo blob mount across the registries anyways. So I don't think it will get worse, at least. But definitely a good idea to make it more obvious what's happening in those cases. And I'm happy to sync up on getting run image mirrors to work if it's something that's be helpful for you.
I wonder if there could be some small gains from doing the mirrors, even if the cross repo blob mounting doesn't work, honestly, because if you have to stream it through the exporter and back up, if you're, say, like running Kpack in Azure, like is probably closer, and the pull and push times are faster, even if you can't cross repo blob mount. So if people are choosing to export to Azure, they might be doing that in a situation where they have a better connection to Azure anyways.
You're still gonna spend the time downloading the whole thing from Azure and then re-uploading it to Azure. And so I don't know if there's any guarantee that, I mean, like we could put it on a list, but it doesn't seem like there's any guarantee that it would necessarily be faster for any particular subset of users.
I feel like in general, once you're running in one of the cloud providers' clouds, using their services are faster, right? Like I find GCR slower for me to use normally for my workstation than Docker Hub, but as soon as you're running a task in Concourse and your Concourse is in GCR, all of a sudden it's by far the fastest option.
Makes sense. I don't think we should not do it. I just don't think it's as beneficial as you know, the normal run image mirror work would be. Cool. So maybe the action there is don't close the issue. Then Rylange can take a look at it along with their list of priorities.
Yep, sounds good. We talked about this today. So we're ready to start taking a look at it probably this week. And we'll keep that issue updated with the progress. And we can also link like a tracker story too. I'm not sure we have one yet, but we can get on that. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Like if it's a lot of work, then I don't think the impact is as much as adding other run image mirrors. So like cache up, think about prioritization here. All right, anything else in the ACR mirror? Add zlib1g to tiny.
This is necessary to do the Java native GraalVM stuff on Tiny. Other libraries it needs to be statically compiled in, but not this one. And there's an argument to be made that it's a slippery slope and we shouldn't add more things to Tiny, but I think this one does make sense. Could be a big win for Java. And the sets of things it needs are pretty stable. So I don't think we're going to follow this up with more requests afterwards.
This is to a tiny run image. What's the impact on size?
I don't know off the top of my head. Ben was the one playing around with this, but yeah.
This is the next door in our backlog, so we'll get to it real soon.
Mark, I couldn't quite hear you there. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. It is the next door in our backlog. We'll get there pretty soon.
Awesome.
Definitely would be good to look at the effect it has on the size of the image. I think making tiny Java apps that natively compile using Graal seems pretty awesome. Or like definitely expands the use case for tiny out to many, many, many more actual production users than we have right now. So like very supportive of making the use case work. I'm a little bit worried that this is, do you know what Graal uses zlib for? Like, is it to unpack jars that are zipped, or like something that we could do ahead of time during a build?
I don't have the detailed knowledge of this to answer that question.
I don't question whether it should work. I question whether it could be done in the build pack, for instance, whether it really needs to be something that is installed on the tiny base image, like in every Go app too. Like, could it be a layer?
Yeah, the Buildpack pulls in itself and installs, maybe.
What about adding, would this be something that could be possibly added like even as like a mix-in to Java build packs or no? Like if it's only useful in the Java cases.
If you're talking about the like dynamic mix-ins, then you can't do that on Tiny because Tiny can't install packages.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
If you're talking about static mix-ins, like the stuff we have right now, you could make a different stack image for Java, like a Java Tiny and a Go Tiny. But at that point, I don't know if it's worth it. You know, if it's not too big.
Yeah, I remember us discussing like potentially doing separate Java stack images before, and we decided it absolutely was not worth it. Because maintaining just that many different stacks would, I don't think would pay off. So
I will say getting this working smoothly, whether we bring it in the build pack or put it on the run image, is going to, I think it's a pretty cool story because there's a lot of hype around GraalVM and it's a little bit hard to get set up right now. And the fact that Buildpacks could just do it, and with the Maven integration for Buildpacks, I feel like it could bring a lot of people to come try out Paketo Buildpacks.
sounds good.
I'm leaving a comment for Ben about whether it makes sense to do it in a launch layer instead. But I'm okay adding it to the stack if we, unless it's huge or something. Cool. Anything else on Tiny and zlib1g? Any questions about what that means? What Graal is? Any of that? All right.
What is Graal?
So there's, you know, Java has like a runtime component called a JVM, right? It compiles into Java bytecode, which is not, you know, machine code. Is not doesn't compile into assembler. It compiles into like another language that then that's sort of more efficiently described that the JVM runs, right? And all the languages in the JVM use this. So Graal is a compiler for Java code that takes the Java code and compiles it into, it's like, it makes Java a little bit more like Go. It compiles it into native code, you know, and then, you know, it puts a runtime next to it that, you know, executes as the native code executes with a garbage collector. And so it's like, it looks a lot like Go, basically, at the end. There are some speed advantages and then there are some speed disadvantages because the JVM is highly optimized for running Java code, but it definitely results in smaller binaries. And in a lot of the use cases that, you know, kind of the Spring team has looked at, it's worth it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on that? Next thing on the list is builder ordering RFC.
Yeah, so this was me. So we saw some people on the Buildpacks Slack saying that they couldn't deploy their apps on because the builder ordering change, which put Nginx and HTTPD before the PHP build pack, making it impossible to detect true on the PHP build pack, because if you had an nginx.conf file or httpd.conf file, which you need for the Nginx build pack, which you need for the PHP build pack, it would detect either true on either the HTTPD or Nginx build pack, if that makes sense. So we wrote up an RFC to come up with an ordering that we would stick to. And so, yeah, it's pretty simple. We just kind of looked at the ordering in Cloud Foundry and basically stuck with that. So, yeah, you can kind of click on the RFC and see. It's just basically a list of which order we think they should be in. We tried to do something fancier before in PR number 22, but it turns out that we can't do that. And it's like hard to like just run some sort of algorithm to tell if the ordering is going to make sense or not. Based on our experience in Cloud Foundry. Yeah, that's it. You can check it out and approve it or not. Yeah, any feedback would be appreciated.
It's not exactly the same as the Cloud Foundry ordering. Josh and I worked together to come up with an order that like tweaks it for like Java has a really wide, detection criteria now with all the things, and you can kind of combine some of them together now. Definitely interested in feedback from the Java Buildpack side on kind of Java's placement there. Want to make sure that's okay.
I'll take a look later.
Cool.
So a question for this one. I agree with the motivation and stuff. I had one question on, so it said that there could be a tool to validate this ordering is correct. Is that same tool or like a separate tool, could that be made to create the ordering itself?
Well, we kind of that was in the original pull request. That was that idea, but we kind of threw that out because after talking to Steven and with our previous experience in the Cloud Foundry build packs, it was just like some build packs just need to come before others, just to keep like good developer experiences, and it's hard to like tell just by looking at the build packs what that should be, I guess. Like an example is like a lot of .NET Core apps have package.jsons in them, and so we just put .NET Core before Node.js because otherwise it'll detect true as a Node.js app if we put Node.js first. And that's hard to like write code to like figure out what's going on there. Like you kind of just have to know, I think.
So in that case though, how would the validation work then? Like for
There's
this,
there's no validation.
Okay.
You could run through all the sample, like the kind of ideal sample apps for it and make sure they all get the right selection of build packs if you wanted to write a test.
Yeah. You could write tests.
Cool. Any other questions on that RFC? Next thing on the list is opening working group meetings and sharing on Paketo Slack.
I just threw this on here again. I know in like some internal meetings we've talked about this a little bit. Are we like in a state of doing this and maybe like next week sharing this out to more folks?
I like that idea. I think there's a little bit of risk in putting the Zoom link somewhere public, but we've done that in the CNB project and it hasn't been a problem so far.
As
long as
for both this one and the non-Java one also.
Yep. The idea is we should be as open as possible to anybody from any other company or, contributors who just want to contribute to the project for fun to be able to join in and even work their way through the governance structure of the project if they want to.
Currently, do we have any visibility on like current outside contributors? Do we have any consistent ones for Paketo?
We have some people in Slack who ask questions and seem to use the project some, but I haven't seen very many PRs. I don't know if maintainers of different repos have any experience with community people so far.
Yeah, because we've talked about ways towards the beginning of all this to like lower barrier to entry, to like, contribute and become part of this project. And that was like a lot of the feedback in the first Hacker News post as well, where people are like, it seems like I'm a target demo for this, but why should I care about this? Or like, it's really confusing. So that some changes were addressed. Like I remember on the website, some more documentation was released, but is there anything else that we could do to lower that barrier to entry to contribution? Or is that something we're even, interested in?
I think making sure that we're engaging with the community we have right now would be really helpful. So like, I know Dr. Nick opened a bunch of issues and, a few other folks have, just making sure that we're, pretty responsive and that people, feel like there's not a core team of people that, talk behind their backs all the time, that kind of thing. Be helpful. But that's a long process and we're coming from, a process that doesn't look like that, right? So it'll take some time.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think there is a Cash App, and I think Javier and some folks were working on getting Buildpacks IO and Paketo IO to kind of like make sense and have a good story together. I don't know if there are any updates on that.
No, not really. We have designer presence now on our side, so we're like getting Sam to just help out with the overall design of the Paketo website, improving like the sort of limited docs ecosystem that we have today, and also like just working with the CNB project a little bit more. So what Javier has in mind is a better concept of like an ecosystem. If you can imagine, like going to Buildpacks IO is the one place that's going to hold, say, references of everyone in the ecosystem. So like Heroku and Google and Paketo Buildpacks and anyone else, and Buildpacks IO being the one place for like concept definition and stuff. So we're still pretty early stages on that. I think the CNB project has made some good effort on that so far. Like they've like improved their landing page a little bit and things like that. Next steps here are just around this ecosystem bit. So as Sam starts working on that a little more, we'll start bringing some of that onto the team.
Awesome. I think once we kind of have everything in order and feel like we're comfortable with the state of a lot of, what we've put together, we could do another marketing push too, for sure.
Quick question about this. Where does the CNB project currently like have a Zoom link? Where is that visible?
In the community repo, I think.
Okay.
Is that this Zoom link?
Nope, that's the CNB Zoom link.
Zoom. Oh, okay, yeah, for the meeting on Wednesdays?
Wednesdays and Thursdays. Yeah, it's 2 a week for that one. All right. Anything else on that? Seems like a good thing to do. Node.js re-architecture.
Yeah, just this re-architecture got some feedback and we've kind of gone in, made some changes, are going to provide another build pack with this like tiny binary to manage all the processes for Node and Yarn apps. Might be useful outside of this, but just want people to take a second look when you have the time.
Can you still use it without the tiny binary?
Can you still write an app that's not going to use it? Use the tiny binary. So
can you not use that build pack? Like, could you just have the build packs run npm start? I see it requires tiny. That's what npm start requires tiny, and that seems interesting.
Yeah, so we could do that. I mean, it's like such a small tool and it solves this problem of sending all signals to the node process that gets started by Yarn or Node. So it seems like we could definitely add groups in that would do this, but it just means you get some weird behavior around signal handling.
Like you could basically you could swap the npm start or Yarn start build packs or Node start build packs for a build pack that didn't need tiny. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean the other option is like have some user configuration to determine whether or not tiny is actually going to be used. But I feel like Dan Makuza raised an issue that made it seem like this was something that we always wanted to fix, right? Which is if you stop your apps, you can get you will never have the opportunity to gracefully shut down an NPM or Yarn app right now.
Makes sense. I see a lot of Node containers that don't use Tiny or a process manager. I worry a little bit about like making the assumption that every user wants it for every app, but it's not. Or like, I trust your judgment. I don't think we have to do it. It's curious if there's a feature where you can provide multiple alternative build plans. And so like npm start could say node npm node modules Tiny or node npm node modules, and then switch it on or off without having to, but it would add some complexity. And if you're convinced that it needs to be there for every app, then like do it's right. I just thought it was interesting. It would require it.
Kasha, can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is the problem around Tiny just specific to like the Node.js language family, or is there value in adding this to any of our other language families?
Don't really know. This is like the first case where we definitely know that signals don't get passed down from the npm process to anything below it. I'm sure that there are other start commands to be right that do this. We haven't really investigated what those are though.
Got it.
PHP, we had the old PHP build pack has a process manager that was written in Python for it. So that might be one that could benefit, or even could be simpler. Or maybe right now, if we haven't tested the signaling, might be worth something to look at too. Cool. Any other questions or anything else on Node.js re-architecture? All right, I think that's the last one on our list. I wanted to mention there's a lot of discussion of what were called root build packs, but maybe called stack packs or stack build packs, or however you want to describe the functionality of dynamically installing operating system packages at build time or before build time on existing stacks. In the CNB project, I might kind of schedule something to, if people want context on that, kind of catch people up on the conversation, because it's pretty hard to understand, kind of going through all the CNB RFCs, and it's very impactful. Like, means build packs can request packages. It means stacks, the meaning of mixins on stacks will change a bit. It's a big change to the API that enables like a major feature people have been asking about for a long time. So I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with the direction that's going, or at least understands why we're doing that.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to be included in that conversation.
Awesome. All right, anything else? Any other topics for today? Thanks, everybody. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, Josh, that setup is really nice. I'm jealous. Get to be outside.
Thank you. I don't know why it took me 3 months to realize I should sit out here instead of in my dark room upstairs.
This is Zoom background.
Yeah, it's fake.
See you, friends.
Thanks, everybody.